I kind of think that the Titans like to try to bleed things out to like drain their power from them. Put something in like in prison and just bleed it out, like, but maybe never let it die, like siphoning the power to use it for something else, or drain like a battery locked in a prison. Azeroth, yeah. It's also kind of the same thing that I think was happening to Argus. But Argus did not. I'm gonna be very interested to see what exactly Azeroth's world soul is inside, because if Argus was not contained, like, here's the thing. In the story 1000 Years of War, it says that when Argus reaches out to Illyria's like mind, she sees it like imprisoned in like, I think it says like chains of fel, or like inside a, it's like a fel prison is what it makes it sound like. But then we get to it, and there's no prison. Am I the only one who's like looked at that and was like, this doesn't really seem like a prison? We didn't even have to break any prison mechanisms for the Titans to literally just take Argus to the seat of the Pantheon. Which is sometimes part of what makes me think, like, I've had this harebrained ass idea for a long time, and I can't prove it, and I'm not going to try to prove it because I don't necessarily think it's real. But I want to be able to make the fucking Titans taking Argus and, like, using the Legion for themselves, and, like, tricking us into thinking that they were, like, being tormented when they were really just siphoning Argus's power to, like, make themselves stronger. Like, there's no way. I can't make it work. But I want so badly for them to have, like, stolen Argus and for him to deceived us that they're actually the ones using the demons. But I can't prove it. So I never would say that it's a thing, but I just think it would be cool for them to switch it up like that. But I think in a sense that's not demons directly, but something along those lines I think is occurring anyway. So I'm not sure how important it is to make the distinction, but it doesn't matter. She also she says she sees Titan architecture very specifically, not Legion designs within the planet. And she wonders why it's there. You know, I think that honestly is true. I think that you're right. At this point, the Titan architecture clearly was already there. Sargeras may have changed it slightly, or the demon influence may have changed it, if at all. But the facility was already there. And Taurus, the Burning Throne, like, what? Like, nah, that's gotta be. And Taurus, huh? Just, your theory could work if Sargeras blocked the Titans from using Argus. Just the Titan architecture, and it just was strange to me that they have Shivara there who are tormenting them with their own. I mean, I guess I understand if Sargeras goes and takes Argus from the power of the Titan, the control of the Titans, that's a pretty big deal. So for the Titans to get Argus's power back, we saw what the Titans were able to use the seat of the Pantheon to immediately use Argus's power to accomplish. You know what I'm saying? Like, they pretty much prove in the fight that not only have they met him before, because Aman'Thul says, time answers to me, Unmaker, the one force that can bind your relentless fury. It's like, they know who he is, they have a title for him and everything, and then they actively just use his power to do what they did with Sargeras. So it's just like kind of wild. Like when you look at that and you're like, And they also had the power of re-origination, which is curious because that seems like Argus's power. Kind of strange too. The Titans had re-origination for like aeons of time. What if Sargeras cleaving Argus in two was his first move breaking free of his domination because Argus is also being used as a battery? Well, that's pretty much what I think, yeah. I do kind of think to an extent that that's the case. I do think that it's the truth lies in Sargeras' sword. I think it's very similar to Anduin Wrynn. Very similar to Arthas Menethil. Except there was no crown for Anduin and Sargeras, but the sword is the key. The reason why some of the only images of Sargeras that we have are him cleaving a world in two with like a sword that has domination runes on it is kind of like, wow. In every piece of art that they show of Sargeras where he has his sword, it's broken in half and it has an eye in the hilt, like an eye that's probably talking to him. Like, stop and think about that connection of like, if there's sentience inside of his blade, one might say that he's mad and like insane, but then one might think about it and look at like, wait, well, what is the entity inside of his blade? What is it saying to him? What is that connection? You know, and I think that at this point, it's pretty clear that the entity inside of the blade was Argus. So for him to have that connection for whatever reason, I think that is inherently part of what allowed Sargeras to maybe break free of the hold of domination. Think about this. When Sargeras and Argus are connected, even though Argus is allegedly the one undergoing all of the torment, Sargeras' rage and fear still manifest as power during the fight. So I'm thinking that it maybe in some capacity this was like a shared burden. And what I think is that what we perceive as Sargeras torturing Argus was actually Sargeras literally connecting with Argus and helping to probably quell some of the agony that he was going through. And I think that through sheer force of will and enduring said agony, which is probably part of why Sargeras is on fire, is part of why this was occurring. And I think that that agony and probably the maybe even the rage stoked from those flames, I think is probably related to how Sargeras was able to control himself and not be under the control of domination. And so if you were to sever that connection to Argus, I think that that makes Sargeras vulnerable to that power. So yeah, I do think that Sargeras basically broke free of control by doing something that he was commanded to do, most likely at some point, or was so enraged that he had clarity in a sense that he was able to do it. And I think that the influence that was left upon his blade as a result of doing so is what allowed him to see, so to speak. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe he really is just fucking insane, but I think that that is what is being misinterpreted for his madness. That, like, he's insane, and that's why he's doing this, and that's why he's trying to bring death to the cosmos, but when in reality, there is a very possible chance that, like, he's literally walking around with death in his blade, like, talking to him. So remember, Pyro, the Hermit says Sargeras still has a pattern to what he does. So maybe he still used Argus as a battery because it's all he knew how to do. A means to an end type thing. And maybe that is the case. Maybe he's only operating within the confines of, you know, his own knowledge and stuff. I mean, I guess to a degree he must be. But Sargeras also has, we've seen instances like with Medivh, I think, where he has studied tremendously. And also, I think, in some ways passed on knowledge to others, like Medivh, like Illidan, that though it may not make them turn around and go, oh yeah, Sargeras is a good guy, it might open their eyes a little bit to some of the inner workings of the reality in which they exist, where these powers are coming from, what the gods are really up to, you know, where the planets aligned, what are the moons doing, what is all of this? It could be both, you know, it could be that he was learning something from them, they were learning something from him, and I think that kind of mutual relationship, that kind of, I don't know, I like to believe anyway that kind of exists in different forms, where it's not just a take, it's a give and a take. And even with his own fucking minions, even when they weren't listening to him, like Kil'jaeden and fucking Gul'dan, like, he was still willing to do things and work with them. So, I just think, I think that, again, Sargeras is a character that is misunderstood, frankly, because the Titans have mischaracterized and misrepresented most likely a lot of what he has done. And I'm not saying that Sargeras is better, but I'm saying that the alternative view being turned into the evil one is probably not the appropriate way to handle the situation by anyone, right? Like, I don't think the Titans just labeling everything that Sargeras does, did, and ever will do is evil, malevolent, and cruel. I don't think that that's true. I think that you see the emotion in the guy's eyes enough when he's stabbing the planet that you can make that conclusion that that's not true. That you can see a little humanity inside of his eyes. I think that's very obvious. And so it just seems, and I hate to say this, but that You don't see that in the Titans as much. You see, I think, more hatred, anger, and or nothingness, just dead, like nothing. Like Agramar just has nothing. Norgannon has nothing. Golganeth and Khazgaroth they're just nothing. So like, I don't even, fuck, for all we know, the old gods are parts of gods that have been severed from them in a like I was saying earlier, in an attempt to order them, in an attempt to get rid of their bad part or something. Like, we don't know what they are. They could be the defense mechanism of Azeroth, you know, coming to life and fighting back against external forces like an immune system, and that's very commonly brought up. I think that that's a super viable option. And I also think that there is, like, as with most things pertaining to the old gods, like their whispers, which often reference more than one thing, person, place, event simultaneously. I think that there's also a chance that the old gods are not all exactly the product of the same exact thing happening, given that they all look very different and seem to wield different powers and even fought against each other allegedly. I don't know if that's true, but it kind of sounds true. Seems like there's a lot of evidence for it. It's like, just kind of makes me think like maybe they were, you know, they all have individual powers and came to be probably by different events that led to similar creatures existing, but they don't necessarily all even have to be of the exact same origin. So that's why I think that there's distinctions to be made potentially between, you know, Yogg-Saron, between Y'Shaarj in terms of their very powers. It's interesting that Y'Shaarj breathes out negative emotions and Yogg-Saron bleeds death metal. You know, like, that's so... Why the difference? You know, N'Zoth has fire in his head and uses flame and shadow abilities and empowers Deathwing with insane power that makes him fucking unstable and falling apart, and Deathwing then calls himself the Unmaker of Worlds, Death Incarnate, so, like, there's connections there, right? In a similar, like... And this, I think, comes back to Argus. I mean, I think it could feed back into the Argus theory that each old god is a part of Argus, and the power that we see them wielding could, in fact, be something that belonged to Argus back in the times. I don't know. Like, if these things are pieces of him, maybe he's reaching out to the Flame and Shadow, the Fel. I mean, the death magic from Maldraxxus, like. Maybe all of these things relate to Argus. Maybe they all relate to death in some way and are stripped and part and parceled out over the world. You know, who knows? Who knows? But the fact that, once again, I was kind of showing earlier that Yogg-Saron appears as a brain. Argus's head is, like, ripped open. His mouth is, like, skeletal. His eyes are, like, fucked up. His nose seems to be gone. His fucking head's all busted up. Like, it looks like parts of him have been taken, and it's just like, you go inside inside of Yogg-Saron, you see a big celestial brain that's blue, you kill it, and it turns dark red, and you're like, the fuck? Can I see this image? Yeah, you could, it's on, yeah, so... This could just mean nothing. And it says, this is the description of Argus: bound, broken, aeons of existence, knowing only pain, a shattered soul, fueling infinite evil. A shattered soul? Like, Argus has been broken up into multiple pieces. And so that his head is kind of like missing. And you can, there's, I don't know how to do it. I think you have to have model viewer. You can remove his helmet and you can see his face. He doesn't look so good. Yeah. So when we talk about someone being potentially mutilated and having parts of their consciousness or soul strewn out across the cosmos, think about this. You know the story about the old gods plummeting from the skies, how the Void Lords made them and threw them out? I mean, just like, what if the Titans just, like, tore shit out of Argus's fucking brain and just fucking flung it out into space? Fuck this guy. Sling that shit the fuck out of here. They broke his ass up, they fucking threw him out in the cosmos, and some of them hit worlds, some of them didn't. But I think if Argus is part of or a creation of Azeroth or the opposite of Azeroth in terms of unmaking and making, then you know, maybe the top of his head is what Sargeras cleaved when he split that world in two. Maybe, and they say that it destroyed, you know, killed the old gods that were there, and there were also Nathrazim there, which are originally from the Shadowlands. So the argument that the world, black and desiccated world that Sargeras cleaved has something to do with the Shadowlands and Argus is extremely fucking high at this point.